Hello and welcome to the Birth Untethered podcast. I'm Shelley, a long-time doula, advocate and former university lecturer.
And I'm Kemi, a badass birth keeper, formerly a UK registered midwife.
Just a couple of rebels with decades of combined experience in pregnancy, birth and beyond getting together to share wisdom. We exist to equip birth workers, families and seekers of truth with informed choice, not fear. Come as you are, learn what they don't teach. This is the birth revolution and you're all invited. Everybody, and welcome to the first episode of season 2 of the Birth Untethered podcast with me, the lovely Kemi, and we've got Tess Lovely with us today, which I'm very, very excited about. So for season 2, what we thought we would do is go through interventions in birth and talk about the, I was going to say pros of interventions. Okay,
There
so
are
it's going to be
pros.
honest that there are pros, but they're probably not going to be as highly featured as the cons.
Yeah.
But obviously when the pros are there, they're there for important reasons, and that's, that is great that we have that available. And we thought that we would start the first episode with really probably the first intervention that happens from medical services, which is the intervention of what is said to you by medical professionals from your first contact with them, from your first appointment. We talk about coercion, we talk about gaslighting, and I think a lot of people find it hard to believe that that exists, that happens, until they've actually experienced it. And I see that a lot. I don't know if you guys see that a lot, where you say to people, look, this is what's likely to happen. If you don't do what they say, what they do is treat you a bit like a naughty schoolgirl, in that they then get someone a bit more senior in to come and have a word with you, and then that word gets more coercive, and if you don't listen to that word, they get the headmistress in or get you into the office to sit you down to have a discussion with you. It's escalating intrusion until you comply, and it's something that Kemi has alluded to, that it is trained into medical professionals, that you are taught how to do it. It might not be labelled that you are coercing people, but when you break it down, that's actually what's happening. So that's why we've invited Tess with us today. So Tess, I would love for you to introduce yourself so people know why we've got you here, what your background is, what your deep knowledge of this subject, where it comes from.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm very happy and excited to be here. So I became a midwife in the North very long time ago, because my midwife gave birth back to me, and that's what I then embarked on this career as a midwife doing, because I wanted to give birth back to women. Just very briefly, in my second pregnancy, I was found to have ovarian cancer. And my mum was being treated with chemotherapy for cancer at the time, and I saw what was going on with her, so I declined the very kind offer of chemotherapy for me during my pregnancy. Kind of delayed it, and then eventually, after I'd given birth and had my baby, really things happened, and I thought, no, I'm not having it at all. So that was the start, really, of my journey of questioning things that were offered within the NHS. And then I became unexpectedly pregnant with my third child, and it was my midwife during my pregnancy with the ovarian cancer and my pregnancy with my third child who just believed in me. Every time I said I didn't want to do something, she was going, you don't have to, it's your choice, what are you feeling? And she really gave birth back to me, and I had my third child at home physiologically. He was £9.7, and that's then when I was like, right, I'm going to be a midwife. And he was born in 1993. And that was the start of my journey, really. And I have to say, my training was particularly guided towards empowering women. I had brilliant heads of midwifery back then. I had when I worked in the community, I had a really big home birth rate. We were supported beautifully, I believe, and I was taught really well, or guided really well in my midwifery career about trusting women and meeting their needs. We did things like home bookings, where you'd go to the woman's house and book a pregnancy there. We did dominoes, where you would go in their labour and they'd make their choice about where they wanted their baby
That
during
was
their labour.
such a good scheme.
It was amazing.
So none of this, no, we can't talk about it, we can't talk about it until you're 36 weeks. Then we want to tell you all the bad sides of the things we don't want you to do, but not mention any of the bad sides of the things that we do want you to do. And absolutely, you couldn't decide in the moment what you want to do. So wow, that's amazing.
It was brilliant. And the other thing which was fabulous about it, because I had such great support from the head of midwifery then, was if I wasn't working and a woman rang me and said, can you come, I was able to ring the hospital and say, I'm going to see this lady, she wants me to go and see her, even if I wasn't working. So effectively I was on call from all my own women. And I remember once a midwife ringing me going, she won't push, she doesn't want to push, she wants you here. And I was at a dinner party and I walked in with my clicky shoes on to this woman and she saw my feet and then birthed her baby, and then I went back to my dinner party. It was quite funny that we were able to have this huge amount of flexibility in the way that we cared for our women, and we knew our women. We gave them 6 weeks worth of education sort of classes, talking all about things. It was brilliant.
I love that.
And I think that having that at the core of me really meant that I was able to provide the care that women really needed, wanted, required, and what was good for them. When that head of midwifery changed, the new head of midwifery came in and was going to undo all of that really great work that we were doing. And so I handed in my notice and I was an independent midwife. And I do have a little core value that is really, for me, it's difficult for women who can't afford those sorts of services. So I worked as a Sure Start midwife part-time, so that I was still able to offer really good stuff to women from sort of disadvantaged families and things like that. And again, it was a brilliant part of my career. And then I became pregnant with my 4th child. Some time had lapsed, like 13 or 14 years, and I was pregnant with my 4th child, and I realised doing the independent work and I wasn't going to be able to sustain it and sustain my family living, so I became a labour ward coordinator. And again, the beginning of that career, that pathway, was fabulous because I was able to support and challenge, and I was a real advocate, and there was me and another brilliant community midwife placed in this very obstetric scene that were just constantly challenging the authorities or this care pathway. Like if a woman came in to be induced, I would say, are you sure you want to be induced? Because you know you don't need to. You're post-dates, but there's no evidence to support that. You know, if you want to go home, we can do other things to kind of support your pregnancy continuing. So it was very much around supporting and giving women what they wanted and needed. And I think the big change for me happened when Saving Babies' Lives came in. And I think that absolutely eroded midwifery completely. Whatever remembrance of midwifery was hanging on in there was absolutely smashed to the ground with that thing that came in. And there's some good aspects in it. I'm not dishing it all completely. The thing about really highlighting the benefits of smoking cessation and things like that was brilliant. But actually the stranglehold constraints and ball and chain that it put around women being able to stand in their own sovereignty has been so detrimental to the maternity pathway, really. And so then I think from then I've just been in a continual headlock. That's how it's felt.
So Tess, for the our listeners who wouldn't really know about that thing that came in, in what way did it do that? What was put in place, or what control was put over midwives that caused that change, do you think?
So many things that really got just put in without robust evidence and supporting factors to it, and it became like a control factor. It was like, in a way, the beating stick of submission for any challenges that went on. So, for example, introducing more scans, offering scans later in pregnancy. Well, we all know there's a huge discrepancy in scans, especially doing size scans. That there can be huge discrepancies from sonographers. You've obviously got an unconscious bias from a sonographer, so if you refer a woman in for a large baby, the likelihood of them scanning a large baby is absolutely increased. I think it's like double or 60% or something. It's like, because they've been told that's what they're looking for. So in their deep conscience, they're going to be inadvertently scanning bigger.
Yeah.
Even though they use these parameters, you know, it's just a known fact that that's the case.
Yeah.
Reduced fetal movements has been a huge thing. This kick counting and things like that, and all of these tasks that are given to midwives or to health professionals to do actually disempowers the woman to be listening to her own self. And because they had all these tick boxes and procedures and guidance to follow, if the woman didn't fit into that criteria, she was disregarded. So if she came in saying, I think there's something not quite right, baby's moving normally but something doesn't feel right, it was disregarded because all the boxes ticked said no. Whereas if a woman came in and was sort of like saying, oh, the baby's not moving very much, and we all know that when a baby's going through a growth spurt, it rests a little bit more in order for that to happen, then it becomes a medical thing and they have to go off for a monitoring. And we all know that the CTG is only as valuable as for the 40 minutes or whatever it's on there. It's particularly not that valuable anyway. The research that it was introduced in wasn't robust or valuable, really. So it just introduced a lot more constraints on a pathway, and it made birth become extremely, I mean, it was medicalised or getting more medicalised, but it's absolutely astronomically medicalised now, and it's forgotten that behind all of these procedures and guidelines and tick boxes that there's actually a human being, a woman, creating a miracle in her abdomen. And it's, you know, from the very point of pregnancy, when a woman becomes pregnant, it's not the health professional that keeps that pregnancy safe. It's the woman. It's by how she eats, what she drinks, how she looks after herself, what her emotional well-being is, how well she's supported, is she being heard and listened to, what's her instinct telling her. All of those things are what keeps a healthy pregnancy. None of that advice is given to women at the beginning of the pregnancy. It's just a whole list of medical ticking, tick, tick,
Yeah.
tick, tick.
Yeah, and risks and piling on worry about risks and concern. In the last series, in the last couple of episodes, we were speaking about kind of over time that eroding of confidence in women, that eroding of women's power, that eroding of recognising the power in our own bodies that has been happening for such a long time. And it sounds like that really is being hugely perpetuated and has taken a massive took a massive jump with that kind of initiative in your mind, in what you saw in practice. And so if you were to say to a woman, okay, I want to really listen to what you're feeling, and you're going against what this tick box thing has said, what were the repercussions for that for you?
The consequences of what would be perceived from the organisation is that you are not following the guidance, and therefore you weren't fulfilling your role as a midwife correctly. Right. And actually that led on to, for me personally in my career, a lot of targeting and bullying and being pulled up for trivia constantly. And whereas I was feeling that I was really reaching into the needs of a woman, I was being told that I'm not doing my job properly. And yet I knew I was doing.
That's really interesting to me, because when you look at the NMC code, it's very implicit in the code that midwives have a duty to support women and what women want to do, and that you give them as much information as they want in order to make their choices, that you offer to give them information, and they can accept or decline that offer. And if they decline that offer, you document it, and that should cover you. But what you're saying is that if you weren't following the hospital guidance, even though it was against what the woman wanted, you would get in trouble for that, you would get punished for that, and that's the situation that you're stuck in.
Yeah. And to the point where if I was doing a booking, I would want to do a face-to-face booking. You can't do face-to-face bookings. You're not allowed. Well, that for me, you're saying that I have to provide fully woman-centred care, and for me that involves seeing them face-to-face and building that relationship with them. Well, you're not allowed. We don't have the time. Time was bantered around quite a bit. I can remember when COVID came in, home bookings were a definite no-no anyway. They'd gone out the window years ago. But face-to-face bookings were knocked on the head and it became telephone bookings. And I can remember sitting in an office listening to somebody doing a telephone booking, and it took them 20 minutes. And if I did a booking on a telephone, it would take an hour and a half. Because I would want to spend more time on that telephone call, not less, because I wasn't seeing them face-to-face. And then I would get into trouble for giving them too much time. You can't do that. We haven't got the time for you to do that. You've got half an hour. Do your booking in half an hour. And so there was this whole merry-go-round that was going on. And it wasn't that, for me, I just don't feel women are getting the care that they deserve. They really do deserve to be loved, nurtured, cared for, heard, seen, listened, and all this. They are creating a miracle. You know, there's an awful lot of work going on in their body. And when a woman becomes pregnant, they want to celebrate and share that with somebody. But there's this whole sort of cultural thing now that you don't tell anybody you're pregnant until you've had your first scan and everything's all right. And actually, the only person then that you're going to go and tell and celebrate this process with, likelihood, is going to be the midwife. And you get allocated 20 minutes telephone call. And it's interesting because a lot of units that went to telephone bookings at the beginning of a pregnancy continued those because it was convenient for the unit. And that's so sad, because the message that clearly gives out to women is, you're not important in this process, it's us. Our time is important, not you. And minimalises the very fact that these women are creating a whole miracle, and they need so much more support and advice around that now than ever before, ever.
Yeah.
And they're just given a list of certain places, very targeted, don't look anywhere else other than the NHS website for your information. Well, how is that giving anybody an informed choice? You know, we should be guiding women to go outside of everywhere. Go and look wide, far, because who knows who you are as a person, what's going to work for you. But go and seek out your information that works and fits for you. You know, we are so physically, emotionally, culturally, so vast and varied. How can one guidance fit for everybody? It can't.
Well, it's guidance, so it's not. They're not rules.
But that's my big bugbear at the moment. I don't know if any of you have ever listened to any of my podcasts, but I go on a lot about, because they're talking about what you were saying earlier about midwives being trained. Midwives are now being taught to use the word policy rather than guideline, and there isn't. None of them are policies. The only place where there should be a policy is in HR, because it's about law, working laws. But midwives will openly go, the policy says this and the policy says that, and that gets compliance. So one simple word can change a trajectory of how one person thinks about their care.
Yes.
And actually how the midwife then performs that care, because if they're using the word policy, they're not going to go against it.
Yeah, I've had this with a client recently who wants to birth outside of guidance, and the words used by the midwife, two midwives that were speaking to her, were way outside of guidance, because she wants to have a home birth, and in a previous birth had a hemorrhage. She was in hospital when the hemorrhage happened, and it was missed actually, really, until it was quite significant. She didn't notice because she was cuddled up with her baby and sort of wasn't really thinking about it, and they didn't realise until there was quite a significant amount of blood. And So they're saying that they don't want her to birth at home because she's had this previous hemorrhage, even though her birth was very disrupted, having to travel in from home to hospital, having people wanting to come in the room when she wanted to be undisturbed. She knows for her that her physiology works best when she's really just left alone. And so that's what she wants for this birth. She would like to have somebody there in the house in case there is an issue, because she had an issue last time. So she wants that safety net of having somebody there, but she doesn't want someone in the room just, staring at her all the time, asking her things, interrupting things. And for me, that doesn't feel like an unreasonable request, that you have somebody in the next room that can be hearing the noises that you're making and be there if needed, sitting having a cup of tea and a biscuit, being, 2 seconds away if anything happens, but that you're not invading that person's personal space. And the wording that was used by these midwives was, well, we might have newly qualified midwives coming to you who wouldn't be comfortable with that. Why do you want them in your home if you're not letting them do their job? They want to be able to do vaginal examinations. They need to be looking at you all the time. They want to be able to listen into the baby every 15 minutes and then every 5 minutes. So if you're not letting them do their job, then why are you asking them to be there? As if she was being very unfair to want the safety net of somebody there if she needed it, but to recognise that she could birth her baby by herself and that's what's going to work best for her. And it was really made out that she was being very unreasonable. And in my mind, I don't think that is unreasonable. I would really love to hear your opinions.
I'm going to wade in on that because she was being very logical. She was saying, well, if I was on your labour ward and with one of your ward monkeys and almost bled out, why would I want to repeat the exact same situation? She's obviously taking care of as many of the psychophysiological aspects of birth of the placenta as possible, being in a familiar environment, undisturbed, etc. Then she's having the additional benefit of having somebody that's supposed to be a professional who we all, because of the nature of bleeding, women losing 600 mils per minute, you can't call an ambulance if someone's bleeding. If you're a midwife, you've got to stop the bleeding. Yeah, because the ambulance is not going to get there in time before you lose your full blood complement. So she's logical. She's saying, should we have a midwife there that's actually trained for years to know how to stem the flow of blood, but be in an environment that doesn't promote excess blood loss like a labour ward? So she's actually logical. It's the response that she got that is illogical, but that then obviously confirms what Tess is saying. They're following guidance, but calling it policy and not applying birth physiology or evidence to the situation. Because we all know that if a woman has had a natural birth, which your client had, there's actually no need to actively manage the third stage at all. You can just use uterotonics as treatment because that's the evidence. But so they're not following evidence, they're not following logic, they're following policy. That's why I will call that a ward monkey. A ward monkey. Yeah. There you go. Something else to get upset about.
Or what made it even more crazy is that, her partner very rightly questioned, the fact that they were saying that if this was a first birth, the midwives would be very happy to sit in another room. That would be absolutely fine. But because of her previous history, that they weren't comfortable with that. And he was like, but surely with the first birth, you would be even more unsure of what's going to happen. So how does that make sense? And they couldn't really answer that. And it was very much like, well, we need to go and speak to legal about this before we agree to support you or not. And I was like, this is just so unlawful. This woman is saying she wants to birth at home. You have a duty of care. You have a home birth team. You have a duty of care to support her in whatever way feels right for her. You can't coerce her into having things she doesn't want. You can't get her permission in advance to say that she's going to accept to have your fingers in her vagina or a cannula in or whatever it is, because people have got to make their minds up in the moment,
Yes, they
and
are.
can change their mind.
But can I add, Nursing and Midwifery Council Code Okay, so any one of us that go onto the register, we are agreeing to follow the code. That's part of our registration, right? And when we go and, you know, we affirm being on the register again on an annual basis, that's what we're saying we're going to do. But in the Nursing and Midwifery Council code, it says you give the information, whatever her decision, you support that decision even if you don't agree with it. So what that midwife was doing when speaking to your client was saying, I'm going to disobey the code, the legal document, right?
The law,
The
human
law.
rights law.
Yeah. I'm going to disobey that. I'm going to disrespect you making an informed choice to sweeten my employer. So she's literally choosing her job and her salary over the rights and needs of that woman and her family.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, they're saying, but you know, we've got to think about how our junior midwives feel, how they feel
Piss off.
if they're not allowed to be in the room.
I don't want a junior midwife in my house for one of the greatest days of my life without somebody who's been doing this for 20 years minimum. There, I said it. Yeah, I'm sure Tess would agree. We were on the register. Yeah, they said we were competent. But I know if I'd started attending home births as soon as I was on the register, there's a high likelihood I would have harmed women and children.
But you know, when I qualified, we were like D's and E's and F grades and things like that then. We weren't numbers. And in order for you to be a community midwife, you had to be a G grade.
G.
You had to have a minimum of so many, like I think it was like 5 years labour ward experience, and that was a senior labour ward position. That wasn't just any old position. You had to be really well versed at doing your job. And as I always say, first of all, the birth doesn't belong to anybody other than the mother.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong to the midwife, it doesn't belong to the organisation, and it doesn't belong to the NMC. It belongs to the woman. Mm-hmm. And a midwife means with woman. So therefore we go to be with the woman.
I understand, like, being with women. I understand that that's where midwives should be. I also understand that by signing up to work for the NHS, they are then also with organisation in order to pay their mortgage, pay their bills, etc., to have job security, all that kind of thing, support their family. So I understand that midwives are in an extremely difficult position. And I did actually try to say that we are, you know, in that thing. Of course, the midwife jumped down my throat because she thought I was saying something else and had taken a disliking to me because obviously I'm a doula, therefore I am the devil. But what I was trying to say is that, you know, we understand that dichotomy. In fact, my client even said, okay, well, if you can't support me, I understand that. I understand where you're coming from. If you can't support me, I understand that. But what is happening is that basically she's being forced into going to a labour ward where she knows her birth is not going to work well. She really doesn't want to be. Last time she was there, she was harassed. People wanted to come in that she didn't want there. She ended up with a massive hemorrhage. Mm-hmm. That's her option, which doesn't feel safe for her, isn't safe for her. The evidence shows it's going to increase her likelihood of hemorrhage and intervention, etc., so it's not safe. Or she free births against her will because the people that are supposed to be there supporting her are not willing to do it, even though that's breaking the law. What worries me is that they have midwives who are fearful of supporting home birth. Why are they fearful of supporting what a woman wants when that's what their code of conduct and what the law should support? It's because their support is not there. And I think, Tess, that you have sort of alluded to and touched on this, but so if you're trying to support a woman, your organisation and your seniors didn't have your back is really a lot of the situation that happened. Basically. Is that what you'd say? Yeah.
Yeah. And it would be, oh, you were lucky this time that all went well. That used to infuriate me because it was like it wasn't luck, you know. And actually, being a midwife and being with a woman, you get paid a wage. And I wholeheartedly agree, we have mortgages to pay and I got paid a wage and all the rest of it. But I didn't earn my money on a day-to-day basis. I really earned my money when an emergency happened and I was able to utilise my skills and knowledge. when you went out as a G grade, you had a huge amount of experience. So if on the rare occasion those skills needed to be utilised, you had them.
Yeah.
Midwives are now qualifying as a band 5 and are going straight out into the community. They don't have that labour ward depth.
No.
And, you know, part of your training as a midwife is that you had to have 40 births. Well, when I did my training, I was in my second year and I had 63 because normal was normal. I struggled in a way to get the ones to trigger the abnormal writing I needed to do. Well, we now have midwives that are struggling to get their 40 because it's so rare to see a vaginal birth. Right. And what's happening is on those really busy nights where it's a full moon and there's a high entity, because midwifery is feast or famine. It's either really busy or very, very quiet. You know, you have one woman on the labour ward or it'll be full. But these students are being pushed from room to room to room to catch a baby. Now, that's not midwifery. And then they're being pushed out into the community to provide care. So I get why they're scared to go to these sort of high-risk things. Well, then let's stop this merry-go-round where we're at the moment then, and let's go right back to basics. And let's go back to sitting, observing and supporting and loving and nurturing and giving women the time and the space that they need to do the job that they're born to do, which is giving birth, rather than make it this massive fear-mongering obstetric disaster road and journey, which is where women are being forced to do. The amount of times I hear women saying, "Oh, I'm going to have my first baby in hospital because it's safer." I'm like, I couldn't think of anything worse. How can it be safer when 30 years you could go into hospital and there was a 7% chance of you having a caesarean section? Today, if you go into hospital, there's a 50% chance that you're going to get a caesarean section.
And higher for your first birth, isn't it? If it's your first baby.
How is that fair? Well, do you know one of the big statistics I did when I was doing some auditing really shocked me was the amount of women that had 3 or 4 normal deliveries that were ending up with a section because they were induced.
Unbelievable.
It was astronomical.
It's so obvious, isn't it?
Yeah. And I was like, why are we even inducing this woman? Oh, because she's 39. Okay.
Nuts.
So she's had 3 normal deliveries, 2 of them at home, and we're inducing her now because she's 39. Well, yeah, that's a really good reason. And then she's ending up with a caesarean section. Oh, and a massive bleed, and a wound infection, and yeah.
And with caesareans, you're 5 times more likely to die. As a mother, maternal death is 5 times higher if you've had a caesarean. So I don't know how you can take all of that information and then the disconnect is huge, the dissonance, and then say, oh, but going into hospital is safer. It just goes to show, propaganda is never meant to be logical. And I think women, the women giving birth and the women serving them, we're huge victims of the propaganda against normal birth.
Yeah, and nothing's more emotive than the threat of a dead baby.
No.
And the illusion of safety of medicine.
Illusion being in air quotes, because it is one big fat illusion.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it breaks my heart to think that women who are these really strong, powerful, wondrous birthing machines have been minimalised into this like timid, feared, scared woman who has been commercialised and profited from.
Yeah, and I think we all do talks with people after birth. We all offer it as a service that people can speak through their births to try to understand what happened. And I, in the last few days, have spoken to a couple of people, and to watch those women who had no issues, were labouring fine at home, went to hospital because there wasn't a home birth service or because they thought it was safer, and then they go in and things just go downhill from there. They're sabotaged. We want to do a vaginal examination. The woman says, no, I don't really want that. Oh, well, we need to do it. We can't give you pain relief. We can't let you in the pool until we've done these things. And this kind of and it happens a lot. I mean, I don't know if you saw that when you were there, but I definitely see it all the time, supporting people who go into a hospital now, and watching these women break down in tears speaking to me about how they felt at the end of their birth, how they felt that their power had gone, that they didn't feel they could be a parent, that they didn't know what they were doing, that they couldn't connect with their baby because their birth has been so, just so many people piling on them, saying things. I've heard the words, they wore me down. They kept asking me to do something until I just told them yes to make them be quiet. And that goes in somebody's notes as informed consent, when actually it's escalating coercion. Now, and I understand that as a midwife, someone's not going to say, oh yes, no, I intentionally coerce someone to do something. I had a midwife the other day very upset with me because she was like, we want to listen into the baby, to the mum, and the mum's like, not right now. Okay, we really do need to listen into this baby. She's like, not right now, in the middle of a contraction. Well, we really do need to listen into the baby because we haven't done it for a little while, and we want the baby to be safe. Mum's like, not right now. She started again to say, well, we're unsure about. I said, okay, I'm going to stop you there. She's told you no 3 times. 3 times, so please just document that no. And she got really shitty with me and went, I'm just trying to do my job. I was like, that's not your job.
No.
This is the thing. I see midwives all the time and they think their job is to stick their fingers up somebody's vagina. They think their job is to listen into a baby. They think their job is to stick a cannula in someone. That's not the job, is it?
No, it's not. And I've got a really controversial defence stick that you can pull out.
Oh yes, please do. We want the tips. Yeah, give us all the tips.
I've done it with a couple of women. Is when you've said no and they've said no, then the woman says, and you kind of pre-prep them for this, then the woman says, can you please get me the safeguarding midwife, please? And they go, why do you want the safeguarding midwife? And you go, and the woman will then say, because you're coercing me, and actually that's a safeguarding issue, and I want to report it. Honestly, changes the whole scene completely.
I just love it. Literally got goosebumps. I want to be a fly on the wall when that next happens.
Most people, they probably would have no idea what a safeguarding midwife is or what their role is. So I'd love for you to explain that, Tess, for our audience.
Okay, so the safeguarding role has been created for families that have some social aspects. So if a woman, in that very long list of stuff at the beginning of their pregnancy, they're asking questions, if there's anything in that history that may alert the midwife that there's a need for additional support, it's not meant to be a punishment role, if you know what I mean. It's not meant to be deemed as punishing the woman, but it's about looking at what her social needs are, and is there anything the services can do to sort of support that. It does involve historical drug taking. So if you were a teenager and you went out and you took some sort of like illicit drugs, but you were no longer in that place, it would be marked and ticked, and the social services would have a record of that. But in on that questionnaire does come aspects of, do you feel safe at home? Do you have access to your own cash? Are you able to make your own decisions? So there's a whole realm in there about coercion, about domestic abuse, because coercion is perceived as a domestic abuse issue. So it's quite an important element within care, because there are some women that unfortunately are living in situations where maybe their husbands are coercing them into particular things or restricting their freedom as a human in their own right. So it has a really valuable entity in it. But for me, and my understanding is that if coercion is seen as an element of abuse, then that means health professionals, while coercing women into an element of care, are actually abusing them. So it's a safeguarding issue. So if they are continuously trying to implement an element of care and a woman has clearly said no, then that is definitively coercion, and actually that is considered abuse, and actually it's a police issue.
Yeah, it's a crime since 2015.
It is a crime. Absolutely, it is a crime. I recently had a woman who rang me saying that she had an issue with her platelets. It wasn't particularly low, but she wanted a home birth. They were at like 113, and the hospital was saying no, she couldn't have it. And they did the what I would call layers of coercion. So she sees her midwife, and the midwife says, well, you can't have it because of this. And the woman's saying, well, I've done my reading and research, and there's no evidence to suggest that that level is. And again, she changed her wording from guidance to policy in a conversation. And so then the next meeting was with the community matron. You know what you were saying earlier about the next layer, and then the next layer.
Senior teacher.
The senior teacher. And then they made her an appointment with the consultant. So she was going along, she rang me because she said, I'm going to this appointment with the consultant and I need to know where I stand on a legality point of view. And I said, well, you need to ask for all their guidelines. You need to ask for their guidelines around, you know, birthing at home, how they support women, what their guidance is on low platelets, how they manage that, what the cut-off point is. But can you also ask for the safeguarding policy and highlight the part that says about coercion in it? So they emailed her all this stuff, and I said, when you go to the appointment, you need to tell them that you want the safeguarding midwife present. So she went to the meeting, and they didn't have the safeguarding midwife present, but there was definitely this, you can't have that, you're not allowed to do it, da-da-da-da-da, and all. And in the end she said, right, can somebody get me the safeguarding midwife present, please? Because you're coercing me and frightening me, and I now feel vulnerable, and I need to put in a formal complaint about the language you're using and the way you're making me feel.
I love
this. She got
this.
her home birth. She messaged me on, I think it was the 17th of December, to say I've had a beautiful home birth of a 8-pound baby, and it was lovely, and I lost 50 mils, and it was wonderful, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had you not empowered me enough to understand how I could step into my power. So
This is so great because it highlights exactly what Kemi was saying earlier about this kind of complete dissonance that you are, you know, as somebody in an institution, looking out for coercion. You're looking out for, you know, restricting a woman's freedoms, and yet you are doing it yourself, and you're so blind to, you know, so blind to doing it yourself. And it ties into an article I wrote for AIMS Journal a few years ago, peer-reviewed. Subject is coercion happening. It was called birth space, supportive or coercive, and I linked in, there were a number of points defined by Women's Aid Federation of England about coercive control as an act or a pattern of assault, threats, humiliation and intimidation or other abuse that is used to harm, punish or frighten their victim. And of the 13 points, I had seen all of them in maternity care. So the first one, isolating you from your friends and family. You know, so we see this very often, don't we? Your partner needs to wait outside, your doula can't come into triage. And so lots of things that a woman doesn't want before she goes into labour, and then she's in labour, and then suddenly she's got a cannula in her arm that she didn't want. Suddenly she's had a vaginal exam she didn't want because her support network has been removed from her. Number 2, closely monitoring your activity. We need to monitor X, Y, or Z, or your baby might become distressed or die. Yeah, so they're using a threat of coercion of saying we need to put you on this CTG monitor, telling you that it's safer for your baby, when we know that the evidence doesn't show that. The evidence doesn't make it safer for your baby unless you're having synthetic oxytocin happening. Number 3, denying your freedom. You have to wait until the doctor has spoken with you. You can't leave. You know, that people hide their notes and say, oh, we can't find your notes. Well, you might as well just wait for the doctor and not letting the person leave the place. Or just saying, no, I'm sorry, you can't leave. We can't discharge you yet. You have to speak to da-da-da, as if hospitals are prison. Number 4, gaslighting. Claiming it's your fault and your baby might die. You know, I had a thing where a woman was given synthetic oxytocin, so the contractions were obviously completely out of her control, and a midwife actually pushed her face to look at the monitor and said, stop pushing, you're killing your baby by pushing. She's like, I can't, you know, she couldn't do anything. Yeah. Number 5, constantly criticising you and putting you down. You know, we see this, I see this all the time. If you think it's bad now, wait to see what happens. where there's a misunderstanding. So if you've got a baby coming at a funny angle, you've got pathological pain on top of labour pain. And so it can feel worse than when you're at the most intense parts of labour, because you don't have the right hormones helping you to cope with those sensations. So I've seen it time and time again, and all a midwife might be caring about, if they're not kind of thinking about it, or haven't listened to their anatomy and physiology lectures, or haven't bothered to study about biomechanics, is that they'll go, oh, you're only 2 centimetres, you think it's bad now, you just wait. And actually the pain is not bad because of labour, it's bad because the baby is in an awkward position. Number 6, forcing you to live by their rules. Well, we see that all the time, don't we? You're not allowed to get in the pool till you're 4 centimetres. During COVID, you're not allowed to have your partner to support you until we've put our fingers up your vagina. And like you say, a lot of the things that helped control women in COVID, that made things more convenient, are still in place today.
Kept them in place.
Yeah, kept them in place because it limits the disruption of their coercion. Number 7, parental alienation, turning your baby against you. Your baby's getting tired now, you need us to let you cut you, we're going to cut you because it's in your baby's interest. Not thinking about actually that it's probably not a problem, that it's normal for a baby's heart rate to go down before they're just about to come out because they're being really squeezed. If we didn't have women on their back with their legs up in stirrups, that the baby would probably have already been out by now. Number 8, policing your lifestyle choices. Ooh, your BMI's a bit high. Yeah, you might have a really fat vagina because, what the fuck? You can't birth your baby at home. Yeah, because you can't birth your baby at home because, just ridiculousness. Making jealous accusations. Well, we'd all like a natural birth, wouldn't we? But,
Oh, that one...
We've all heard these, haven't we? This is the thing.
Yeah.
Number 10, depriving you of access to help and support. Again, we need to do a vaginal examination before you can have gas and air. I've seen it so many births. Or, well, we might run out if we don't know. When we know that doing a vaginal examination gives you no clue as to when a baby's going to come.
No.
It's dilation of the cervix.
It's not the cervix that holds a baby in. It's the position the baby's in that keeps it where it is. It's not the cervix. Because the cervix can go from 1 centimetre to fully dilated just on a turn of a baby. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had recently where a woman said, I don't want vaginal examinations. I don't want you examining my vagina. Do you know what the midwife said? We're not examining your vagina, dear. We're examining your cervix.
Well, how'd you get to the cervix then? A perennis?
How gross is that? How gross is that? She kept doing it, like using her medical knowledge. She kept using medical terminology to try and confuse and lessen the woman and make the woman feel as if she didn't know, like to undermine her authority in her own body. I see it clearly playing out. It's abusive tactics. It's awful. 11, regulating your bodily autonomy. No drinking. No eating in case you need a cesarean. So we'll deprive your body of the nutrition and nutrients and fluid it needs in order to function well.
Yeah.
So we can funnel you down the path just to make us feel safe on basically no evidence at all. There is no evidence about that aspiration is there. It's like 1 in 200,000
The anaesthetists have already told maternity services to stop their shit.
Yeah. Number 12, making violent threats. We'll cut you if we don't get your baby out on the next push. Women being held down, forcibly having things happen to them. This is happening. This kind of stuff's happening. You're safer in hospital though, people. Keep believing that. I mean, seriously, fuck's sake, when are you going to wake up? Number 13, blackmailing you. I'm sorry, I'm really cross about it. I've had a few interactions recently that have just been so gross and disgusting that it's made me rage. It's made me really rage, and why I was so
Shelley,
happy
it doesn't
to have you all
happen
today.
anymore. Why are you saying these things? It's not happening. I was just speaking with a woman this week 6 months ago when she was having her first baby with no instruments or whatever, but it's just taking a little bit of time. Whilst the baby's head is on the perineum, they were arguing with her about why she's not on her back in lithotomy. The baby's head on the perineum. She was in a lateral lying position, which we know also is excellent for giving birth to a baby. The baby's head was born And at that moment, they said the rest of your baby won't come unless you get onto your back in lithotomy. Now, how's she going to be able to argue that with her head hanging out of her and a poor husband like a deer in headlamps? So, of course, they put her legs into lithotomy, and of course, she got a second-degree tear where prior she said nothing was happening. It just felt beautiful. So it's that kind of insidious, disgusting, thoughtless, heartless behaviour that people are saying is safer than if you're being respected by competent midwives in your own home.
Yeah.
But it boils back to down to the organisations making birth about the health professional and not about it being about the woman.
Yeah.
It's all about, and it's all come about through the litigation, and once a lie starts, they just keep adding layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of lies on top of it, because they are unable to go, do you know what, we made a mistake, that
So
wasn't
true.
robust. The thing about the breech birth, like when they pulled in the Peel study where it said women can't birth breech babies, that research was so badly flawed because it had
so
premature
flawed.
babies in.
Yeah.
So, but instead of acknowledging that, because they know that once they acknowledge that, all the rest of their research will unravel, because they'll then realise how flawed everything is that they've been provided as evidence. What they did is they just kind of muddled along and said, we'll try and get women to have vaginal breaches again. But everybody's de-skilled in performing that.
Yeah.
So midwives are now scared of doing vaginal births. And actually, when a woman's having a birth, we don't do anything. The less we do, the better. That's what makes it safest. Less is more.
But
No, I'm sorry, no, Tess. Staring at somebody, putting your fingers in their vagina, that's what midwifery is. That's what makes it safer.
So I always look at the woman's eyes when they're having a baby, because you can tell so much more. And I don't know if any of you guys get this feeling, but I've had it throughout my career. Like, people will be going, have you examined her yet? Is she fully? And I'll go, no, she's not fully. And they'll go, how do you know if you haven't examined her? And I'll go, I just know. And when women become fully, I feel it. Like, I feel like I need to go for a poo.
Yeah. Oh, yes! That would be a time when I used to bleed. That would be a time I'd start to bleed. You'd feel it. You'd even smell it.
Yeah. But actually, when I was a student and that used to happen, I used to think to myself, this is a really awkward time for me now to go for a poo.
Yeah.
Why do I need a poo now? I hope I don't fart.
Yeah, that's right.
But actually,
but
then
you're
the penny
midwife.
clicked, and I was like, she's fully.
You're a real
this is my mechanism I can use, so I don't need to examine women.
That's right.
And it happened. I recently did a birth with a woman, and she had a hospital birth only because she'd been fed teaspoons of fear. So she'd woken up, had a PV bleed. It wasn't a PV bleed, it was a heavy show, but because you haven't seen blood for 9 months and there's big alarm bells over blood, she rang triage before she rang me. And they said to go in, and then she rang me, so I said, I'll meet you at the hospital. But what she was describing to me was a heavy show, which would indicate to me that her labour was establishing. She'd had quite a sort of a long latent phase. And we get to the hospital, and she's like a dying duck on this sort of bed, bless her, and it was like, come on, get up, let's get this breathing going and all the rest of it. And we did all of this. But the teaspoons of fear that they kept feeding her, we don't know where the bleed has come from. We don't know if your placenta's going to abrupt. If you bleed, baby doesn't, it might affect the oxygen flow to baby. There was all these like little teaspoon things that they kept saying to her. The CTG, we need to have a continuous monitoring to see how well your baby is. And we managed to go through everything, and then her labour, once she'd settled down, her labour really did accelerate. And she went, I don't think I'm going to get home. And so I said, okay. And she said, I think I need to stay here. Now, in the back of my head, I know she's wanting to stay there because it's a safety net. And she said, but I know all their interference is going to increase the chances of intervention. And I said, you can stay here and not have any of that. They don't need to examine you. You don't need to be monitored. You can labour and create your own space in the hospital. And that's what she did. she stepped into her own power and she came off the monitor, and you know, she wouldn't be VE'd, she kept declining, and then they kept offering teaspoon, and in the end I said, you're going to have to say to them, thank you so much for your kind offerings of care that you're giving me to reassure you, but I don't need this reassurance. And when I do need that reassurance, I know what I can ask for. And she said it. She was so brilliant.
Oh, Tess, I love that. To reassure you. To reassure
I love
you.
it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Brilliant.
And
are you
Tess,
listening to this, people? Tess is giving you
better be
absolute
taking
gold
notes. You better be taking notes. But Tess, you see, the issue here is, and obviously what was done at the time was what needed to be done. But if you hadn't been there, Tess, if you hadn't been there to keep her on track with her nose,
Well, do you know, it was absolutely a case. At one point I thought I need to go, because it's really important as a support person that you are well nourished, and I hadn't had a drink or anything, so I said I'm going to go and get a quick sandwich. So I whipped out for 20 minutes. I came back, she was on the monitor.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck
They
is
saw
that
you go
here?
out the door.
Like,
exactly.
and when I looked at the monitoring, I'd been gone 20 minutes. There was 15 minutes of monitoring.
Yeah,
on there.
they got
Within
cracking.
minutes
Wait long.
of leaving,
They literally saw your shoes going off down the hall. They went, right, let's go in there and coerce her.
so I just gently said to her, do you need a wee? And she's like, no. And I said, oh, it's really good to keep an empty bladder in your labour. Let's go for a wee. And took her off to the toilet. And I just went, they are not going to offer to take you off the monitor, okay, because that monitor is reassuring them. And then I talked to her about all the reassuring factors within the CTG. And I said, so if you want to stay on it, if it's reassuring you and you're comfortable and happy with it, then stay on it. But if you don't want to be on it, and it's, you know, not fulfilling your needs, then you will need to ask to come off it. And she did. She went out and she went, I want you to take me off this. And she came off it. And I was just literally at her head end. And I knew when she was fully, because I could just see it in her eyes. Yeah. And
she needed a poo.
I didn't fart though.
Phew. Yeah.
And then I could hear this midwife like really get it, because she was on all fours over the back of the bed, and I was like squished over the back of the bed, just looking in her eyes and breathing with her. And then just at this, I thought, oh, she's going to have a baby in a minute. I just knew, I could just feel it. And then I just said to her, right, in a little minute, the midwife, you'll need to listen to the midwife's voice, okay, so that you can hear what she has to say. And then I leaned in a bit closer and I went, but just pant.
Yes.
And then I leaned back and she was looking at me like we had this massive, beautiful eye contact, and she was just going. And then this baby was out. Mm-hmm. And in the background, I could hear the midwife going, little push, little push.
Yeah, right in the background. Shut the fuck up.
And she's going.
Yeah. Sorry.
I was at a birth recently, a home birth, where it was handover as the baby was sitting on the perineum, and there were 4 midwives shouting at this woman to push. 4. And then, because the baby was then emerging and really needed it to slow down, because this mother really wanted to protect her perineum, it was very important for her, the lead midwife then screamed in the woman's face to stop pushing, to drown out the other 3 that were telling her to push. And luckily, I'd said to them beforehand, as I always do, they're probably going to say a lot of things now, and there's probably not much I can do about it to make them quiet, but I just want you to listen to your own body, do exactly what feels right for you, just block out everything they're saying. So afterwards, I felt almost like, I really felt like I was going to cry at how awful it was, what they were doing to her. And I said, I'm really sorry that I couldn't stop them doing that. She's like, I didn't notice, Shelley. You told me just to listen to my own body. She said I could hear them like in the background vaguely sort of shouting to push, but she's like, I didn't feel like I needed to push or I wanted to push at that point, so I just did what felt right for me. So I was really pleased that happened for her. But you know, what's happening for all the women where they don't have someone saying that, or even if they do have someone there trying to support them, like Tess or me, that they still hear it. Because part of them has believed that propaganda and thinks that the other person knows better than their own body how to do it, and so it's seeping in. Yeah, it's just It's tough.
When I
It's
was
tough.
when I was a labour ward coordinator, if, if I was going in to assist in a room and it was carnage, like when emergency buzzer went off, I used to really get irritated when everybody ran into the room. I would be like that matron going, "Everybody walk!" Because
Yeah.
I feel if you're rushing into a room, you're rushing in with this emergency energy.
Yeah.
I used to walk into a room,
That's
and the
right.
first thing I would do was walk up to the woman and I would go, "Look at me. I want you to take a big breath. Nice big breath in." Because quite often they'd be railing around in absolute fear. Get them to take a massive breath and breathe out. And I would go, "Right, now I want you just to slowly breathe out. And I want you just to listen to me. What's going on?" And I would communicate with her.
Yeah. Good.
And it would completely change the tempo in the
So
room.
beautiful.
Because everybody would just like stop and go,
Yeah,
"What's she
shall we all
doing?"
calm down, please?
Yeah.
And that's what you need. And you know, like if I was training midwives to be dealing with resuscitation, I would make them go and stand at the resuscitaire and put on the APGAR clock for a minute and just stand and stare at it.
Such.
And they'd be
love
like
it.
sweating their pants because it'd be like that minute would seem like an eternity.
Yeah,
And I would
yeah.
go, "You're going in and doing an APGAR score at like 10 seconds. That's
That's
not an APGAR
right.
score.
That's not an APGAR. Oh
You
my
need to
gosh.
stand for a minute and understand what a minute
Yes.
feels like in real life."
Yes. And then have the respect for the child and their
Yes.
transition. Because the APGAR, the first one, has always got to be taken at 1 minute, not at 10
Yeah.
seconds, like you said.
Could you guys explain for the viewers what an APGAR is? So that they
Okay, so
know.
when a baby is born, there are 5 measurements of scoring. They do the tone, the colour, the heart rate, the respiration, and what's the final one?
Response to stimuli.
Response to stimuli. Well done, thank you.
You did very well being put on the spot there.
So when a baby is initially born, quite often it will do a startle reflex and it will go like this, and that's a normal physiological, it's a celebration for me. If I see a baby doing that, I go, we don't need to do anything, because it's the trigger for all the rest of the responses to happen. So it will do a startle reflex and then it will go down. And it will kind of go floppy. And then if you wait a minute, then you should then assess the colour of the baby. And a colour of a baby can either be white, blue or pink. And you get 2 for pink.
We'll talk about tones, because for black babies, they
Yes.
won't be white.
Well, we
blue,
do,
or pink.
yes. I mean, it is very, very white orientated. But actually, when you're looking at babies of colour, of variant colours, you know, there are other aspects that you can look at them to see whether or not they're well perfused.
And you can look at their palms and the soles
yeah.
of their feet.
And things like, yeah. So there are other aspects. But actually, in your midwifery training, very rarely is that ever talked about.
No, of course
Rarely.
not. No, of course not. We're in a systemically racist system here.
We are, yeah.
And it's
Wow,
very
so
clear.
in training, people are not taught to recognise APGAR of a black or brown skin baby?
Tess and I were both trained like in the noughties and the 90s, so, but we don't know what's happening now. Hopefully
Right.
people respond to this episode and let us know what's happening now. But I know that they've only just produced an app, an amazing student midwife produced an app that actually focused on how to recognise suppressed infants that are black or brown.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite shocking. And again, tone, if they're floppy, you know, some might have a little bit of movement and some can have rigorous movement. Some will have a grimace rather than a loud cry. Some will have their heart rate. If you pop your hand onto their chest, you should be able to feel their heart rate. And according to what that's at would be your scoring of whether it's below 100, above 100 and things like that. And then all of these scores are added up and they get a score out of 10 after a minute. But most APGARs, I have to say, and I've witnessed, are done within less than 30 seconds, usually.
Yeah, which the baby hasn't had time then even to realise they've been born to do any of their transition.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of panic about a baby's not crying.
When we're looking at APGARs, yeah, so responsive stimuli could be a cry or a gurgle or whatever. But those of us, especially those of us that observe babies born through water, we don't usually see the cry at all. But we'll see a baby wide eyes wide open, clearly vigorous. So one of the things, you know, that both Tess and I probably we'd be looking at a baby, say within the minute, if the baby's arms and legs are out flat. So there'll usually be like a little bit of a kink at an elbow or whatever, a kink at the knees, which we'd call a 1. But if their arms and legs are flat out, that for us would be a 0. Chances are we might be thinking about what are we gonna do? What have we got prepared? Changing the baby's position in the mother's arms, etc., without actually wading in. Because there's things, or even if we support the mother to recognise certain things, like, you know, no tone in the neck at all, or something in the baby's mouth. You know, even there's, I think, Karen Strange, she's a specialist in America that is always trying to teach labour and delivery nurses and midwives and obstetricians about less is more when it comes to that newborn transition, because they transition themselves in the vast majority of the time. So if you just observe and wait, and, you know, you don't do things like, you know, like Tess talked about the startle reflex. So what the startle reflex does is it opens the chest cavity so that the baby can start to use their lungs. If you frighten a mother and say, take your baby, take your baby, take your baby, or anything like that, she's going to grab her baby so tight the baby won't get a chance to do the startle reflex. So sometimes it might be just, okay, loosen your grip, and then opening the baby's arms. So it's just that intelligence, that great training, because Tess and I are actual midwives. Yeah, we both deregistered, so we're not allowed to call ourselves midwives now. But we have those skills and would lovingly pass them on to everyone. It doesn't have to be an obstetric nurse that learns these things. These are things that all humans should know. And that restores birth to the woman.
I was at a birth. It was a caesarean, and the baby had a known abnormality, and me and this woman had fought quite astronomically to get survival care for this baby, because they were only going to offer comfort care, because the chances of the baby surviving beyond 18 months was pretty slim. And it really broke my heart. I mean, it was a massive case. It had a massive impact on me mentally, emotionally, supporting that woman. Anyway, she had her caesarean section. It was a planned caesarean. Oh no, she was planning to do a vaginal birth and couldn't have a vaginal birth because of the sort of abnormality that was presenting with the baby. Her labour got stalled, so went for a caesarean. And because in the notes they'd only put comfort care, it was a really bizarre sort of scenario to be in. So the baby came out and it did all the normal reflexing, and then the baby was given to mum, and she was then begging to have some help for some like resuscitation, because the baby went like blue, and it, from my position it was really difficult because I wasn't there as a midwife supporting her. I was there at that point as an emotional support. I wasn't on duty and I wasn't allowed to do anything, and the woman was crying and begging, asking for help and support, and everybody was ignoring her. And do you know what? She naturally resuscitated her own baby.
Yeah.
And she got so many precious hours with that baby that she would have never ever had. And it was just that natural instinct. And if we respect women in that moment, they actually will resuscitate their own babies if it's required, in a natural entity. And she, I mean, I won't go into the depths of the trauma that we all experienced with that experience, because it was horrendous. I mean, she was screaming and shouting, and I was leaning in saying, I said to her, just tip the head back a little bit, just open up the airway, which she then did. And then she started mouth to mouth naturally. Then this baby gave a cry. And of course, everybody in the room was expecting this baby to die. And of course, then when the baby didn't die, nobody knew how to behave.
But where's their humanity?
Well, this was my whole point in the pregnancy. This was my whole point in the pregnancy, when they moved away from survival care to comfort care. that when they said, no, we're not going to do that. And I was like, who are you playing God? Who are you? You can't, if this is what the woman wants, you know, then we need to, and you know, I know, and it'll be a really controversial thing for me to say, but I'm going to be proud and brave in saying it. It was because she was a refugee. And that was the only reason why they wouldn't give her survival care. Had she been a white woman, a white middle class woman, that baby would have got survival care.
Yeah, I know that's true. I support a lot of refugee women, and they, you know, you really see the worst of people's behaviour. Really, absolutely the worst. You know.
And conversely, if a baby was born that the mother didn't want people jumping on their chest and chest compression and removing her baby from her, etc., they wouldn't listen. They would cut and clamp that cord, run away from her with her precious baby, and be doing all sorts if the decision was made to provide survival care. So that really is them playing God, and to know that they're playing God according to somebody's ethnicity, again, is maternity services safe for all women and babies?
No, absolutely not. I was with a refugee mum. She had her baby. The baby had good tone, was eyes open, just wasn't crying, and they wanted to take the baby off to the resuscitator. I was like, the baby's fine. The baby's got good colour, good tone. I was like, stop. And she was going to clamp the cord. I said, the mum does not want the cord clamped and cut. And I was like, the paediatrician, if he wants to assess the baby, can walk the 2 steps from the resuscitator to look at this baby that I can see very clearly is fine. She started milking the cord and said, that's the same.
So
dangerous. That's not the same. Don't do it. Clamp to cut the cord. Of course, they clamped the cord. The baby cried.
Yeah, because
it needed to at that point, didn't
it? Yeah, because they've just cut off.
Absolutely, get some oxygen into.
Yeah, they've just cut off the baby's transition time, all within under a minute. The paediatrician just literally looked the baby up and down for about 10 seconds, and baby's brought back. It's like what's the point of that?
But you see, their ritual is to deprive the baby of their full blood complement. So this is another reason why, I define midwives from obstetric nurses, and I call out the ritualistic sabotage of health and birth. These are crimes being committed. We will look back at these days, if our mouths will drop open. At the same way, we're all shocked that people used to empty their chamber pot into the Thames. Yeah, we are committing terrible human rights abuses, public health abuses. We're doing that and calling it care. And so this is one of the reasons why, Tess, will you please just keep talking to us?
And Tess is going to continue talking with us on the next episode of the podcast as our conversation continued on, delving more into those depths, giving you more amazing tips. So we will see you next time for the next episode where this conversation will continue.
You can sign up to the Birth Untethered mailing list from the link in the show notes, become an Untethered Rebel, support the show and join the growing community that meet together online each month to share collective wisdom, support one another and also to receive extra resources that supplement podcast episodes.
The information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and may not reflect those of the hosts. This content does not replace professional medical guidance.